Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Most of you are probably familiar with the concept of infinite scroll. It's when you're using an app or website and as you scroll down, new content continuously loads. In other words, the available content never stops. It's infinite. The most famous example of infinite scroll in today's world is probably TikTok. You open the app and their algorithm continuously feeds you recommended videos as you keep scrolling down. The same goes for Facebook's infinite newsfeed, Instagram's infinite explore page, and to a certain extent, autoplay features on streaming services like YouTube, Netflix, and Hulu. With a never-ending flow of content, it makes sense why people would stay on your app or service. Without a determined end of content, people end up staying longer. A good counterexample to this is that we rarely go past the second page of Google for more results. There are other factors at play, and Googling something certainly isn't a form of social media, but the logic remains. Because we have to click the second O to move to page 2, there ends up being a determined end or break in the content we're receiving. I'm willing to bet that if links continuously popped up as we scroll down Google's search page, we wouldn't limit ourselves to the content that was previously only available on the first search page. We'd be willing to keep scrolling through more and more links. So why is infinite scroll so addictive? It comes down to the psychology of our brains. Our attention is best held by the unknown, and infinite scroll provides a small dose of that every time we scroll down onto the next piece of content in our feed. In the words of behavioral engineer and author Nir Eyal, our brains can't get enough of trying to predict what's next, and our dopamine system kicks into high gear when we're waiting to know if our team will make the field goal, how the dice will land, or how the movie plot ends. Like a loose slot machine, the infinite scroll gives users fast access to variable rewards. So in plain words, the gist of the issue is that infinite scroll is bad because you stay on social media for longer. I want to write that clearly because, as you'll see later in the video, the issue gets muddled and kind of disorienting. The creator of infinite scroll is a guy by the name of Asa Raskin, who designed it in 2006. He points out what's obvious to all of us. In order to get to the next round of funding, in order to get your stock price up, the amount of time that people spend on your app has to go up. With app participation being a significant criterion for success, it makes sense that companies want people to stay on for as long as possible. It gives companies more ad revenue, improves their numbers, and increases their ability to collect data. After seeing the impact his creation is having on tech addiction, Raskin says he feels guilty about his design. As is the case with most new programs and creations, it wasn't his goal to addict people to their social media, but even the best intentions are no match for corporatization and the allure of wealth. Why is this an issue now instead of 2006 when Raskin designed infinite scroll? Well, there are a variety of reasons for this. First, and perhaps most obvious, new technology takes some time to catch on. But as it did, companies began realizing the addictive potential of infinite scroll and implemented it into their services. Perhaps most importantly, this integration of infinite scroll paralleled the rise of social media. In 2006, only about 8% of US adults used social media. Today, that number is 72%. If you look at people between the age of 18 and 29, potentially the most active age group that was polled, their social media use went from 16% in 2006 to 90% today. The participation increased drastically. With more people, the conditions for infinite scroll were perfect. It kept the people on those apps. Like I mentioned earlier, infinite scroll isn't simply bad because it keeps people on their devices for longer, but it's how it plays with our psychology that is concerning. Sean Parker, the first president of Facebook, explains that their company, along with others, aim to take up as much of their users' time as possible.
That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop.
He describes it as an exploitation of human psychology, which makes sense since a recent study showed that people who excessively use social media display signs of someone being addicted to cocaine or heroin. While the claim seems pretty drastic, the point stands that social media is addictive. This is especially concerning for the most widespread users of social media, those who are under the age of 30. This demographic, specifically teenagers, are especially vulnerable to these types of effects. All of these concerns have been articulated in a recently introduced bill called the Social Media Addiction Reduction Technology, or SMART Act. The act, proposed by Senator John Hawley, aims to curtail the technology that keeps people on social media for longer, including the banning of infinite scroll, auto refill, and badges like Snapstreaks. Beyond the debate of how much the government should regulate tech companies, the act also advocates for the implementation of a time limit for each social media service. So if you were using Instagram, you could only use it for a set amount of time a day, after which you could not access the app. Right now, the bill isn't very popular in the Senate, and it's unlikely that it will ever pass. That's not to say that it doesn't raise some important questions regarding how much we use the social media we are so familiar with, and whether our choice to use it as much as we do comes from our own choice or from the addictive tools found within those apps. With all that being laid out, I want to talk about what's probably the most important part of this video, and that's the connection between overuse and addiction. What I mean is that, is it right to call overuse of social media addiction? A recent Oxford study found that social media doesn't really affect teenage life satisfaction. In other words, it didn't really contribute to an overall sense of happiness or an overall sense of sadness. These people are still using social media as much as the Pew Research Center study shows, but it's not really affecting them. Doesn't this contradict the study connecting social media to addiction to cocaine and heroin? Well, sort of. That one was a very narrow study of 71 participants doing one specific task, the Iowa gambling task, which evaluates impaired decision making. So that study relates more to decision making, while the Oxford one relates to emotional well-being. This again brings up the question if we should so freely jump from the word overuse to the word addiction. But the discrepancies and narrowness of these studies is what's important to realize. Is social media addictive, aided by the tools like infinite scroll? The answer to that is somewhat ambiguous and unfulfilling. For the most part, there just isn't enough science right now to make decisions like the one the SMART Act proposes. Maybe it will be the right bill, but right now we simply don't know. Maybe science will show that social media leads to conclusive addiction, but right now that's looking at the issue too narrowly. We shouldn't so absent-mindedly make the jump from overuse to addiction. With what we know, maybe using social media for 3 hours a day or 6 or 10 could be normal for today or normal for the future. The line between normal and overuse could be drawn at some point, and if it is, we should treat overuse as just that. Overuse. But who gets to decide that line between normal use and overuse? When does overuse become addiction? And to what extent does the government have a role in regulating social media use? Who is responsible then? The companies, the users, or the government? Do you see how complicated this is getting? There just isn't enough information right now to know what social media addiction is, or if it even exists. Or to take a bigger step back, what social media overuse is and whether we can deem some of it actually being overuse. In terms of infinite scroll, it's pretty clear that it keeps you on your device for longer. But to humor me, ask yourself this. Is it that bad to be on your device for longer? Online use does have some pernicious effects. While some studies show that it really doesn't affect your emotional well-being, others do show that. It can alienate you from the real world. It can cause physical harm due to strained eyes and bad body posture. But online tools also have countless positives. We can connect to millions of people at our fingertips and find ways to stay occupied and productive during times of boredom. Addressing social media addiction by limiting time on those apps may get rid of some of the negatives, but it also gets rid of those positives. I also want to clarify that there are more studies linking social media use in general with mental health, but the debate about social media addiction and infinite scroll is trying to draw a link between the length of time using social media with negative effects on the user. Obviously, both issues are deeply interconnected, but the social media addiction debate is more concerned with the length of time devoted to the use of social media, not just social media use in general. That being said, it could be entirely possible that limiting social media use would leave its pernicious effects while removing the positive ones. The reason that this all seems ambiguous and inconclusive is because right now we just don't know enough about the issue to make an educated decision. The authors of the studies that I previously mentioned all emphasize that their studies are early first steps in the research of social media addiction, so it's clear that there's still much more that needs to be done. In the words of Anthony Wagner, the chair of the psychology department at Stanford, the literature is a wreck. Is there anything that tells us there's a causal link, that our media use behavior is actually altering our cognition and underlying neurological function or neurobiological processes? The answer is we have no idea. There's no data. And that isn't necessarily bad. Just like with any research, we are in its early stages. More studies will be conducted because social media is a big part of our lives and its effects need to be researched. Given more time, we will know more. But for now, know that infinite scroll is keeping you on your device. It's a tool used by companies to keep your attention, but is the idea of staying on your device that bad? I don't know the answer to that, and maybe no one does. What can be done is look at social media in your own life, assess how it affects you and whether you want it, or even if you want to use it as long as you do. If it's a negative, try distancing yourself from it. If it's a positive, keep using it. If it's both, try a little bit of each solution. Ultimately, the choice is yours.